All right, what's happening, fam? L.A.R. movement still moving. The book is entitled Lessons from a Non-Custodial Father at Amazon, Kindle, and CreateSpace. A link will be in the description box below as usual. This video is entitled, Did We Invest in the Wrong Gender? I think about, communities and building communities. And I think about the community when the community was heavily invested in the boys first. And now I think about the community as it's heavily invested in the girls first. And, when you have an experiment, you have to, look at group A and group B and look at the results, right? So this is what I'm doing right now. When our community was invested in the boys first, I think the community was smarter and safer, and they had more spectacular people with males and females, right? And I think when the community invested in the women first, I don't think we are smarter, and I think we're less protected, and we have less than we had years ago. And this is what I mean by that. There's nothing wrong with female empowerment, but I think feminism and female empowerment morphed into something else. And I think it became a competition between the model of the male protector and provider versus the model of the female protector and provider. And as I look at the history that I know, that I can hands-on see with my own eyes, or that I've been told with my own ears, when the community invested in the men first, it wasn't perfect. Let's just say that. But the men and women had wisdom and knowledge, and they had skill set of multiple things. The men and women could do multiple things. Like it was nothing to have an uneducated family who had of a man or woman who was sent to work off as a kid, whose children went to school and became smarter and better individuals, right? But their parents were still smart. And that's just at the lowest level. So it went up from there. So I'm taking it from ground level up. I think when the community has been more highly invested in the women, being the protector and provider, I think the community the community's wisdom has went downhill, and people aren't as smart as they used to be, and they have way more information than they used to have, and that to me is a problem. That to me is a very big problem, and I'm not just saying this on a women front thing, but because it's women. No, I'm saying I'm being as objective as possible because I want to put this out there. A lot of the great history that was made in our community came when the boys were the protectors and providers of the community. The girls were involved in the things that made the community great, but the men were the driving force. And I think, we've sent women to school, and this is what I mean. You sent our young ladies to school back in the day because you didn't want them to depend on a man. And one of the ironies about that was they didn't want these young ladies to depend on men because men were not necessarily not providing, but they were too busy skirt chasing while they were providing, so they weren't to be trusted a lot of times. Cheating really got in the way, in my opinion. People didn't live well, but people were able to have families and maintain families and grow families, the ups and downs of even Jim Crow, right? They were able to be a team and actually create a productive family. Right now, when we concentrated on investing in the females first, we can't be a team and produce a good family. And I think, people want to overlook that part. Now, the other thing I gotta say about that is this: if somebody hasn't noticed this, um, they used to say, get a job. I mean, get an education so you can work and not depend on a man. And then we look at the men like you need to be entrepreneurs and this and that and third. But the boys aren't educated as much as the girls, right? But when the boys were educated, they got jobs. They went to school, they got the educations, or they got skills. And they became a master at that skill, and then they became an entrepreneur. They didn't just go straight into entrepreneurial endeavors until they mastered a skill. And I think that's the difference right now. Like, when we highly invested in our women, they've gotten their education and they've been in the workforce, but they don't have any skills to actually become entrepreneurs, or they don't want to be. So when the feminism morphed into this female protector provider, you know, the community is less protected, of course. And, even those women who are raised to not depend on a man are looking for a man to be a provider for them, even though they were taught to provide for themselves and protect themselves. So I think that's part of what I mean by, did we invest in the right gender? Because, to no fault of some of these ladies' own, they were taught to be self-sufficient, even though they can't be, or they're proving that they're not good at being self-sufficient. So it's a catch-22. Because when you put the young boys to become young men and drive the society, they take on the responsibility of being protectors and providers, and everything that goes along with it. They don't. There's no running from that. But once you invest in the women and you do that, they can still always fall back on evolution, history, and how male-female relationships work. Because even in this society where they want things to be gender neutral, they really don't want the male-female social dynamic and relationship dynamic to be gender neutral. They really don't. And they don't want the provider aspect and a protection aspect to be gender neutral. And I say it like this. The reason I say that is because if this whole society did it, then, and we sent these young ladies off to school, and they were highly invested in education, because a lot of that's what a lot of families did. They really doted over their daughters and pushed their daughters into education, get your education, get yours. They didn't do it with the sons. The teachers in the school more so gravitated to the girls and not the boys. The families itself highly bought the girl cars and bought her, clothes and jewelry, and basically pampered her through school to make sure she got an education. And after she got it, and they invested in her, there was no responsibility to pay on that investment. Like if you did it with a boy who grew up to be a young man and you did all that, there's a responsibility that he has to pay to the community with that investment, whether it be being a grown man, creating a family, and taking care of that family, and teaching that and helping better in the community. That responsibility isn't on the young lady's shoulders or the women's shoulders who we have invested in with education. Furthermore, the women aren't providing jobs. That's not their responsibility, right? The women aren't maintaining the societies. You don't see the women building the buildings, or you think, oh well, even even drawing the plans for buildings, or doing the landmarks and everything like that. You don't see the women building the freeways, or keeping the plumbing of society working. You don't see that, right? So with this over investment in the women first, the society has slowly crumbled as far as maintenance is concerned, because females like comfort, and that's no fault of, that's how they're raised and groomed. So everything they have to do is comfortable. They don't do any uncomfortable labor. So when they're in that model of protector and provider, they can't really provide or protect. Like, when women say they protect people, or we protect you, all women do when it really goes down is scream and cry. The men are the ones who have to get up and bear arms and put their lives on the line. Women can't fathom that responsibility, right? So what happens is we're living in a society that invested in the wrong gender for too long, and now they don't necessarily want to correct it because the women have so much freedom. But even with that, the women are losing it because they can't handle the responsibility of a protector and provider. And this is one thing I have to say about that at the end of the day is this. Their elders should have known this wasn't going to work. But they wanted their daughters to have a freedom that they never had without thinking about what it will cost. And it costs a lot, because the very men that these women are looking for as protectors and providers, they will cut off at the knees to invest in you and these daughters to become women. So the men that they're looking for to protect and provide, they've actually benefited at them being shortchanged and stunted in society so they can get ahead. Like, they've been held back. So when you're looking for this man who is all these great things, he's in arrested development because the society, because it invested in you as a woman, purposely held back this young man. And now when you want a protector and provider in your natural sense, the pickings are slimmer than you anticipated. And now the older generation was like, we didn't think about that, so what are we going to do? Now, a lot of those people are either dying or dead, dying, or walked away as old and absolved themselves of responsibility. So now it's just a big mess. But at the end of the day, now we're raising children in this. And that's part of the reason I believe that, people don't want to bring children into the world, and partially they don't want to get married because we've invested in the wrong gender for so long that we've seen no benefit in it. In this model of social structure is really at the point where it's teeter-tottering on collapsing. And even though the women say, it's because, the men did this and the men did that. The men allowed this to happen by letting you ladies actually get what you asked for, which was empowerment and equality. And now that's true. But since you've got empowerment and equality and then morphed into something else, you've totally failed and dropped the ball on, anything you can do, I can do better. Y'all totally failed on that mantra, I'm just as good as a man, and y'all totally failed on that. So to turn around and say something like, it's the men's fault. Well, this is why there's going to be a visceral response to just pushing ladies out of the way, because in some ways the men that are held back still feel like they're better and smarter than you ladies, and that you're incompetent. So they're not going to listen to you, because you failed to produce since you decided to take on the mantle of protector and provider for society. It's been an utter failure. And not to, y'all were put in this position. Y'all didn't ask for this. Your generations prior put you in this position. They're the ones that asked for it. So, it's a bit of a conundrum. That's what I feel. We out.